Hello everyone, I hope you all are doing good. Preparing for your exams as well. These are the last topics I want to communicate to you, and I want you to learn these two very important topics throughout the course of our studies. Today I will be talking about the foreign policy perspective in public policy analysis, that how we are going to how we can analyze any policy. And before starting this, I would like to connect this session with my previous session, in which we took health policy as an example. And like that session, in this class, we will discuss its relationship with foreign policy, as we discussed in our previous session. Today's session is more focused on foreign policy. We will have a glimpse of foreign policy, we will have an overview. So, this is the overview. We will have an bird's eye view in which will we describe the impacts of foreign policy, main concepts regarding foreign policy, and how it is important when we analyze or when we draw some conclusions regarding any policy. First of all, I'm going to describe the scheme of studies or the contents of this lecture. Contents are the first of all we will discuss what is foreign policy. The question which we will ask from ourselves, the question which we will ask before starting any topic is, what is the reason, why that thing, why that concept, why any concept is important, why that concept was created. So in this session we will discuss the meaning of foreign policy, its connectedness with the public policy. Second point is introduction. I will give you a brief introduction of the topic, then we will discuss different concepts, and amongst those concepts, a very important concept is coexistence. We will discuss the importance of coexistence in foreign policy. We will discuss the importance of coexistence during uh, difficult times. We discuss the importance of coexistence in the public policy. And then we'll have a very light overview of the relations with India, and then globalization, and then we will consider last but not least that important point, CPAC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. This is the uh, contents of our class today. We discussed foreign policy. We discussed the matters of policy in our introduction to this course. When we were discussing policy, when we were discussing different options. So in this, we will discuss different issues like how, why we use these two words. We discuss, let me elaborate that for you, that why we use these two words for this faculty, for this system, for this approach, for this subject. Why we have these two words in which we will minimize our domain. Number one is policy, as we discussed, and number second is foreign. When we combine these two words, we discover different dimension of international relations. We discover different ways. We discover different paths from which we will be able to understand the policy and the policy options. So, which made us think why we need this, why we need foreign policy. This is important. This is very much significant to know that why we need a policy, and in general, and why we need foreign policy to be specific. So the question is important, and the answer to this question is because we cannot live in this world, we cannot live uh, in the community of this world and remain isolated and remain separated, disconnected from the other states. This is the reason we need set patterns, we need set laws. That is the reason why we need to code and decode the different rules and regulations for one state uh, to the other states. We need to define our ideology, we need to define our goals. As you all heard uh, till this point, that in international relation there is no enemy, there is no permanent enemy, and there is no permanent friend. Then why states start a relationship? Then why states conduct the foreign relations with each other? Then why states need each other when there is no permanent friend and when there is no permanent enemy or foe? Why state uh, continue to interact with other states? Why not live in isolationism? Why not live separately? This is the question I want to ask. I want to address, and it has a very simple answer, which means that a state is that entity. State is an entity which cannot live, which cannot survive in isolation because of different objectives, because of its goals, its uh, its parameters on which the ideology of that state lies upon. So that is the reason we need foreign policy. As if I may say that as a policy, why we need a policy? We need a policy. So that is the reason we a state system which developed from the ancient ages, which developed from one state to another state, from monarchy to democracy, which means that we need to interact with each other, we need to learn to live with each other. And that is the reason, and that is why we need a foreign policy, as we need a policy in our daily matters, in our daily routine. like we need a plan to go to the market, like a policy that we will not speak lies or we will not call bad names. That is the policy which we will conduct with the others. Suppose that one individual is like a state, and that individual has have to interact with the other person. Similarly, that person which is looking friendship with other person will always require the you can say reciprocity from the other person as well. In personal cases, in individual cases, the amount, the you can say the ratio of self-interest or the interest is minimum. But when we talk about international relationship among different countries, the most important thing which we follow, which a country follow, is its self-interest. And their self-interest are the main reason which drive their foreign relations with other countries. So isolation is not an option in foreign policy, in any policy, in policy perspective, or in policy analysis. A state always needs another state for resources, for minerals, for authenticity, for different, for militarily purposes, for economic development, for its purpose. So that is the reason the isolation is not an option. And in foreign policy, we deal with two very important terms, which I would really like to tell you that these terms are bilateralism or multilateralism. Bilateralism means that when a country is in relations with another country and there are only two countries involved, then then we call it a bilateral relationship, like the Pakistan India relations. These talks we call bilateral talks, bilateral issues. The issues, the relations between two countries is bilateral, and multilateral means in which two or more than two countries are interconnected with each other, relying on each other, on under the, you can say, dialogue with each other. More than two, when there are different countries, there are different you can say nation states conducting their governmental issues, acting upon their foreign policy and interacting with each other. Those states were called to be in the multilateral relations. So this is very important. Isolationism, bilateral and multilateral. So remember these terms. Then introduction of foreign policy. We discussed foreign policy like in detail, but I would really like to introduce with common examples, which means that no country in the world can live in isolationism, as we discussed it in our previous slides. Hence, in this scenario, a country which is living in isolation will be considered as an easy prey or an easy target from the other states, from the perspective of other states. Second is the independent word foreign policy holds a significance place. This is the independent word. This is the word where sovereignty exists, where we respect the integrity of foreign countries. So, in this word, foreign policy is important because we cannot, in this modern age, just launch or just wage a war on another state like in previous times, like under the monarchy, under the tutelage of king. Here in this in modern system of democracy, they the electors and the representatives or the people who are holding a public office are responsible for their actions, and their action is evolved on due to the aspirations of people. So basically, they are representing the people, and people are the major force behind the formulation of foreign policy. Thirdly, a country without foreign policy is like a ship without radar, which drifts aimlessly in the water, like a blind man, like a aeroplane without any communication from the communicating tower, from the aviation, like a ship. What I am trying to say is that without that is the direction. Foreign policy is the direction of a country. Foreign policy gives a country a direction to move, like a ship. Like you locate something on a map. You know where to go. You know what you want to achieve. You know what your country requires. So that is the reason we know we want foreign policy for a country. Number fourth, to understand the country foreign policy, we need to start with circumstances from the beginning, like in the case of Pakistan. Let me give you this example as we started from the scratch in 1947. Pakistan started, Pakistan was being created by by British Empire, by the British Crown. We got independent. And to understand Pakistan's foreign policy, we need to go into the details of history. We need to go into the details of those circumstances in which we lived, in which the country lived, survived, faced different threats, and those threats made Pakistan more resilient. Pakistan found its foreign policy. Pakistan found from which country it can uh, take benefits and which country is bad for Pakistan or containing the negative or the bad impressions or the bad relations with Pakistan. So, in other words, if any country wants to make its foreign policy, it is important to start from the beginning and You cannot ignore the historical background of foreign policy in which that country survived. Without knowing the historical background, without knowing the history of any country, you cannot make or analyze a country's decision regarding anything else with foreign country. Let's suppose if a country A is about to wage a war on country B. This is the example of aggressive or active foreign policy. Take the example of Nazi Germany before Second World War. Why Germany started Second World War? What were the reasons in which German army started to invade Poland? Because the answer lies in the history of Germany. Why German people are so much in favor of their leader Hitler, Adolf Hitler, because of the history. So in foreign policy, we cannot make a policy option, we cannot make a policy without knowing the historical background or the historical events in which that country, any country underwent.